Danielle Foster was 29 years old, and standing in her own doorway that Tuesday evening, she made a decision that would either expose her husband's hidden fortune or reveal her as the most heartless woman in their suburban neighborhood. She stood there in her blue nursing scrubs, the fabric feeling less like her professional uniform and more like a costume for the performance of her life, rehearsing the 5 words that would test everything she suspected about the man she'd married 3 years ago. Aiden, I got fired today. 5 words, simple, devastating, and completely untrue. Those 5 words would either secure her financial future or shatter what little conscience she had left. Looking at Aiden through the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted in the living room, hands already on his hips as if bracing for confrontation, Danielle knew the lie was about to change everything. Danielle wasn't some gold-digging opportunist who'd married for money. She had a solid career as a registered nurse at Metropolitan General Hospital, pulling in around $78,000 a year with overtime. Her husband, Aiden, was the CEO and founder of a tech startup called Vault Secure, a cybersecurity firm that had been gaining serious traction in the industry. They weren't wealthy by Silicon Valley standards, but they were comfortable. They had a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, took weekend trips to the mountains twice a year, and split their expenses like any modern dual-income couple should, or so Danielle had believed for the first 2 years of their marriage. The truth was, Danielle had started noticing things. Small things at first, but they'd accumulated like snow building into an avalanche. The way Aiden had become increasingly secretive about his phone calls, stepping out onto the back patio whenever certain contacts rang. How he'd suddenly insisted on keeping their finances completely separate, claiming it was necessary for the business and investor relations. The expensive watch that appeared on his wrist one morning, which he'd brushed off as a gift from a board member. The hushed conversations about valuations and equity stakes that would end abruptly whenever she entered his home office. But the real red flag, the moment that changed everything, had come 3 weeks ago. Danielle had arrived home early from her shift at the hospital. A patient transport had been canceled, freeing her up 2 hours ahead of schedule. As she'd walked through the front door, she'd heard Aiden's voice carrying from his office upstairs, animated and excited in a way he never was with her anymore. I'm telling you, Terrence, the pre-IPO valuation is looking solid. We're talking 8 figures minimum, possibly 9 if the next quarter performs like projected. I just need to keep everything under wraps until the paperwork's finalized. Yeah, especially from Danielle. The moment she finds out the real numbers, she'll want her hands all over it. I need to protect the assets first. Get the postnup drafted properly. Danielle had frozen at the bottom of the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribcage. 8 figures, possibly 9. Protect the assets. Postnup. When Aiden had emerged from his office 5 minutes later, he'd found her in the kitchen, unpacking groceries she'd grabbed on the way home. His face had registered brief surprise before smoothing into that practiced smile he'd perfected for investor pitches. Hey babe, didn't hear you come in. You're home early. Patient transport got canceled, Danielle had replied, forcing her voice to stay light and casual. Thought I'd start dinner. He'd kissed her cheek, a quick, perfunctory gesture, and grabbed a beer from the fridge before heading back upstairs. I've got another call in 10 minutes. Might be late tonight. That overheard conversation had burrowed into Danielle's mind like a virus, corrupting every interaction that followed. She'd started watching Aiden with new eyes, cataloging every suspicious behavior. Over the next 3 weeks, she'd noticed how he'd pull away when she tried to kiss him, offering his cheek instead of his lips. How he'd stopped asking about her day at the hospital, barely looking up from his laptop during the dinners they still occasionally shared. How he'd started moving some of his designer clothes, the expensive shirts and shoes that had mysteriously appeared over the past 6 months, into the guest room closet, claiming he needed more space and didn't want to crowd her. And then there were the financial maneuvers. Aiden had brought up the post-nuptial agreement twice in the past 2 weeks, framing it as protection for both of them in case the startup failed. It's just smart business, Danielle. Keeps the company assets separate, so if Vault Secure goes under, they can't come after your nursing income or retirement accounts. But Danielle had heard what he'd really said on that phone call. Get the post-nup drafted properly. This wasn't about protecting her. This was about protecting his hidden millions from her. When she'd resisted signing anything, suggesting they wait until they had time to review it together with an attorney, Aiden had gone cold. 2 days of barely speaking to her, working from his office until past midnight, sleeping in the guest room because he was up late and didn't want to disturb her. The man she'd married, the ambitious but genuine entrepreneur who'd wooed her with home-cooked meals and long conversations about building something meaningful together, had disappeared. In his place was someone calculating, distant, and clearly hiding a fortune he had no intention of sharing. That's when Danielle had decided to run a test. If you enjoy stories of calculated deceptions and shocking revelations about the people we trust most, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more devastating than the last. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Danielle had consulted with an attorney first, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Victoria Brennan who specialized in high-asset divorces. She'd laid out everything she'd observed, every overheard fragment, every suspicious financial move. Victoria had leaned forward across her polished desk, fingers interlaced, and fixed Danielle with an appraising stare. What you're describing sounds like asset concealment, Victoria had said carefully. If your husband is hiding the true value of his company and positioning himself to file for divorce after securing a favorable post-nup, you need to act strategically. But I need to be clear about something, Danielle. Suspicions won't hold up in court. You need concrete evidence of his intentions and his actual net worth. So, what do I do? Danielle had asked, her voice tight with anxiety and anger. Sometimes, Victoria had replied, people reveal their true financial security when they believe the stable income is gone. If he thinks your nursing salary is no longer available, his reaction will tell you everything you need to know. Does he panic because you actually need that income? Or does he stay calm because he's sitting on millions and your $78,000 a year is pocket change to him? That conversation had led to this moment. Danielle standing in her own doorway, blue scrubs feeling like a liar's costume, about to walk inside and deliver the most calculated lie of her life. She'd tell Aiden she'd been fired. She'd watch his reaction. She'd gauge whether her income actually mattered to the man who'd promised to build a life with her. And then, based on what she discovered, she'd decide whether to file for divorce before he could lock her out of the fortune he was hiding. Danielle took a deep breath, pushed open the door fully, and stepped inside. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that the secret Aiden was hiding had nothing to do with greed, and everything to do with the most profound sacrifice a husband could make for the woman he loved. Danielle walked fully into the living room, letting her purse slip from her shoulder and hit the floor with a heavy thud that punctuated her entrance. Aiden turned from where he'd been standing near the window, his expression already guarded, those dark eyes of his scanning her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she couldn't look away. Not now. This was the performance of her life. Aiden, she said, and she didn't have to force the tremor in her voice. The anxiety was real, even if the reason behind it was a lie. We need to talk. Something happened today at the hospital. He crossed his arms over his orange sweater, and Danielle noticed the way his jaw tightened. What is it? She took a breath, steadying herself, and delivered the words she'd rehearsed a dozen times in her car. I got fired today. Budget cuts. The hospital is eliminating positions across 3 departments, and my unit was hit hard. They let go of half the nursing staff, including me, effective immediately. For a fraction of a second, Something flickered across Aiden's face. Shock, maybe, or confusion, but it vanished so quickly that Danielle couldn't be certain she'd seen it at all. What followed was far worse than shock. Calm. Complete, unnatural, chilling calm. Aiden's expression didn't crumble into panic. He didn't rush forward to embrace her or ask if she was okay. He didn't even look particularly surprised. Instead, he simply nodded, slowly, as if she'd just told him the mail had arrived early. That's, he paused, his voice measured and controlled. Unfortunate, Danielle. That's really unfortunate timing. Unfortunate timing? Danielle felt ice spread through her chest. She'd just told him she'd lost nearly $80,000 in annual income, and his response was, unfortunate timing? She pressed forward, building the narrative, watching his face for any crack in that disturbing composure. Aiden, this is devastating. My salary was our stable income. Your startup is still volatile. You've said so yourself. Without my nursing income, we're going to have to rely entirely on Vault Secure, and if the company has a bad quarter. She let her voice trail off, injecting fear into the silence. We'll need to make some serious adjustments, she continued, the panic in her voice now entirely genuine, because his reaction was confirming her worst suspicions. We might have to sell the house, move somewhere smaller, cheaper, and my benefits, Aiden, our health insurance was through the hospital. We're going to have to figure out coverage, and that's going to cost. Danielle? Aiden interrupted, holding up one hand. His voice was still maddeningly calm, almost gentle. I understand this is a shock. It's a shock for both of us, but let's not spiral into worst-case scenarios right now, okay? He moved toward her, but stopped a few feet away, maintaining that careful distance he'd been keeping for weeks now. I need to make a phone call. There are some financial things I need to sort out immediately, given this news. But after that, maybe in 30 minutes, we'll sit down together and go over our budget. We'll look at the numbers, figure out what adjustments we need to make, and create a plan. Does that work? Danielle stared at him, her mind racing. Financial things he needed to sort out immediately. What financial things? Was he calling his attorney right now to accelerate that post-nup? Was he moving assets into protected accounts? And why was he so calm? The answer crystallized in her mind with brutal clarity. Her income meant nothing to him. $78,000 a year was insignificant compared to whatever fortune Vault Secure was actually worth. He didn't need her salary because he was sitting on millions, maybe tens of millions, and he'd been planning to cut her out of it all along. 30 minutes? She repeated, her voice hollow. 30 minutes, Aiden confirmed. I promise we'll talk through everything then, but I really need to make this call right now. It's important. Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked toward his home office, his stride purposeful and controlled. Danielle watched him go, watched the door close behind him with a soft click that sounded like a vault sealing shut. She stood alone in the living room, her blue scrubs suddenly feeling suffocating, the lie she'd told sitting heavy on her tongue. But it wasn't guilt she felt. It was fury. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what happened. He just needs to make a phone call to protect his money. Danielle's hands trembled as she bent down to pick up her purse. She pulled out her phone and retreated quickly to their bedroom, closing the door and leaning against it. Her fingers flew across the screen, typing out a text to her friend Rebecca, the only person who knew what she was planning. I did it. Told him I got fired. Rebecca, his reaction was insane. He was completely calm. Like I told him, we were out of milk. He said he needs to make an important phone call about finances, and then we'll go over the budget. This confirms everything. He doesn't need my income because he's hiding a fortune. He's probably calling his lawyer right now to lock down his assets before I can touch them. I'm filing for divorce. Tomorrow. Before he can hide anything else. She sent the messages and sank onto the edge of the bed, her heart pounding with a mixture of vindication and rage. The trap had worked. Aiden's reaction had told her everything she needed to know. His suspicious calm, his immediate pivot to sorting out finances, his complete lack of emotional response to her supposed crisis, it all pointed to one conclusion. Her husband was a calculating millionaire who'd been planning to divorce her while protecting every penny of his hidden wealth. Danielle looked down at her phone, at the draft email to Victoria Brennan that she'd prepared days ago. All she had to do was hit send, and the divorce proceedings would begin. She could file first, catch him off guard, and fight for her fair share of whatever he was concealing. Her finger hovered over the send button. From down the hall, she could hear the faint murmur of Aiden's voice through his office door. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious, intense. He's protecting his money right now, she thought bitterly. While I'm in here falling apart, he's on the phone with his lawyers, making sure I get nothing. But something stopped her from sending the email. Some part of her, the part that still remembered falling in love with Aiden 3 years ago, wanted to know exactly what he was saying in that office. Danielle stood up, her nurse's training kicking in as she moved silently across the carpeted bedroom floor. She opened the door just a crack, positioning herself where she could hear down the hallway toward Aiden's office. His voice was clearer now, low and strained, carrying through the house in the evening quiet. And what she heard in the next few minutes would destroy everything she thought she knew. Danielle stood frozen in the bedroom doorway, her phone still clutched in her hand, the unsent email to Victoria Brennan glowing on the screen. From down the hallway, Aiden's voice continued, muffled but audible through his office door. She knew she shouldn't listen. This was a violation of privacy, the kind of thing that would make her no better than the calculating husband she suspected Aiden had become. But she'd already told him a devastating lie. She'd already set this test in motion. What was one more transgression in the service of protecting herself? Danielle pressed her back against the bedroom doorframe, angling herself so she could hear more clearly. She held her breath, straining to catch the words drifting from Aiden's office. His tone was different now than it had been in the living room. Gone was that controlled, measured calm. His voice sounded heavy, exhausted, weighted with something that almost sounded like grief. I understand the timeline is aggressive, Aiden was saying, but given what just happened, I need to accelerate everything. Can we move the final transfer up? Danielle's grip tightened on her phone. Final transfer. There it was. He was moving money, hiding assets, exactly as she'd suspected. There was a pause as whoever was on the other end of the call responded. Danielle's heart hammered against her ribcage so loudly she was afraid she'd miss what came next. No, I haven't told her, Aiden continued, his voice dropping even lower. That was always the plan, remember? She doesn't need to know about this. It's handled, or it will be once you process the paperwork. She doesn't need to know. The words hit Danielle like a physical blow. Her suspicions were being confirmed in real time, word by damning word. But then Aiden spoke again, and something in his tone made Danielle's breath catch. The full amount, yeah, $150,000. I know it's everything, but what choice do I have? $150,000. Danielle's mind reeled. Was that what he was hiding? That seemed too low for a tech startup about to go public. Unless that was just what he was moving right now, and there was more, much more, that he'd already concealed. She leaned closer to the doorframe, pressing her ear toward the hallway, desperate not to miss a single word. It's from my father's life insurance policy, Aiden said, and now there was unmistakable pain in his voice. The inheritance I received after he passed. Yes, I know what it means to liquidate it, but this is more important. Danielle frowned. She knew Aiden's father had died 2 years before they'd met, and that there had been some kind of inheritance, but Aiden had never discussed the details. He'd said it was invested, that he was keeping it separate as a personal emergency fund. Why would he be liquidating his father's inheritance now? Unless he was trying to hide it from her before the divorce? No. Aiden's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Don't put it in a joint account. That defeats the entire purpose. I need you to send the funds directly to the street. Jude's Specialty Care Trust. All of it. Street Jude's Specialty Care Trust? Danielle's confusion deepened. That wasn't a bank. That wasn't an offshore account or a shell company. That was... Her blood ran cold as recognition hit. Street Jude's was the hospital system that had handled her medical care 6 years ago, before she'd even met Aiden. Back when she'd been in a catastrophic car accident that had left her with a shattered pelvis, 3 surgeries, and medical bills that had consumed her early 20s. Bills she'd told Aiden were settled. Bills she'd assured him were paid off through a combination of insurance, payment plans, and settlements from the accident. Bills that, in truth, still carried a balance of nearly $150,000 because her insurance had capped out and the at-fault driver had been uninsured. I need the remainder of Danielle's premarital balance zeroed out, Aiden said, and his voice cracked slightly. The debt from her accident. I've been working on paying it down for the past 18 months, but there's still a significant amount left, with her losing her job today. He paused, and Danielle heard him take a shaky breath. I can't let her lose her nursing license over this debt. If the collections escalate, if they report her to the state board, everything she's worked for gets destroyed. I saw the late notices that came to the house last month, the ones she tried to hide. She told me everything was settled, and I let her keep that lie because I knew she was ashamed. But I can't let her drown in this anymore. Danielle's legs gave out. She slid down the doorframe, sinking to the floor of the bedroom, her phone slipping from her nerveless fingers. The late notices. She'd intercepted those from the mail, had hidden them in her car, had been planning to handle them somehow, someday, when she had the money. The medical debt had been her secret shame, the financial albatross she'd been carrying since before she'd met Aiden, the reason she'd been so obsessed with financial security in the first place. And Aiden had known. He'd known for 18 months, and he'd been paying it. It's my gift to her, Aiden said softly, and Danielle could hear tears in his voice now. My father always said that when you love someone, you protect them, even from themselves. Especially from themselves. Danielle doesn't need to carry this weight. She doesn't need to feel ashamed or indebted. She just needs to be free of it. There was another pause. No, please don't tell her. Ever. This stays between us. Just send me the confirmation once the transfer is complete and the account is closed. I need to know she's protected. Danielle pressed her hands over her mouth, choking back a sob. The money he was hiding wasn't a fortune he was keeping from her. It was his inheritance, his father's legacy, the last tangible piece of the man who'd raised him. And he was giving it all away to pay off her debt. The debt she'd lied about, the debt she'd been too proud to admit still existed. I know she told me she'd settled her old medical bills, Aiden continued, his voice steadier now, as if he was gathering himself. But I saw the notices. I did the research. I contacted the hospital system. I've been liquidating the inheritance in stages to pay it down without her knowing. But with her losing her income today, I can't risk waiting anymore. If those collections agencies get aggressive, if they garnish her wages or report her license. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Danielle sat on the bedroom floor, her blue scrubs damp with tears she hadn't realized she was crying, and understood with brutal, devastating clarity exactly what she'd done. Her lie about being fired hadn't exposed his greed. It had triggered him to sacrifice everything, his inheritance, his father's legacy, his financial safety net, to protect her from the consequences of her own lies. She looked down at her phone, at the email to Victoria Brennan still waiting to be sent, the email that would start divorce proceedings, the email that would paint Aiden as a calculating monster hiding assets from his wife. The email that would brand her as the most heartless, ungrateful woman who'd ever lived. Because the truth was, finally, horrifically clear. Aiden wasn't hiding a fortune. He was hiding a sacrifice. Danielle couldn't move. She sat on the bedroom floor, her back against the doorframe, tears streaming down her face in silent, devastating waves. From down the hallway, Aiden's voice continued, each word hammering another nail into the coffin of her calculated test. The payment structure has been manageable so far, Aiden was saying, his tone more businesslike now, as if he'd pushed down the emotion to focus on logistics. I've been sending monthly payments of $3,000 from the inheritance account for the past 18 months. That's brought the balance down from around $204,000 to $150,000. $204,000. Danielle felt bile rise in her throat. She'd told Aiden her medical debt was settled. She'd looked him in the eye 3 years ago, when they were dating and talking about building a future together. And she'd assured him that the accident was behind her financially, that everything was handled, and he'd believed her. Or at least, he'd let her believe that he believed her. But that was when Danielle had her full salary coming in. Aiden continued. I could afford the monthly payments from my inheritance without touching Vault Secure's operating capital or my own salary. Now, with her losing her job, I need to accelerate this. If she's unemployed for months, if money gets tight and she starts digging into our finances, she'll discover the medical debt is still active. And then she'll know I've been lying about knowing. He's been protecting my lie, Danielle realized with a sharp, painful clarity. He's been letting me save face while he quietly fixed my mistake. That's why I need the full liquidation now, Aiden said firmly. Sell all the remaining investments from my father's policy. The index funds, the bonds, everything. I know the market's not ideal right now, but I can't risk waiting for better conditions. Transfer the entire amount, $150,000, directly to Street. Jude's Specialty Care Trust. Account number ending in 7,743. That's Danielle's medical debt account. Danielle wrapped her arms around herself, physically trying to hold together as the magnitude of Aiden's sacrifice crashed over her. $150,000. His father had died of a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, leaving Aiden as the sole beneficiary of a modest life insurance policy. Aiden had told her once, early in their relationship, that his father had worked 2 jobs for most of Aiden's childhood to make sure that policy stayed active. It was meant to be Aiden's security, his foundation, the thing that had allowed him to take the risk of starting Vault Secure without fear of complete financial ruin. And he was liquidating all of it. Not for his business, not for his own security, for her debt she'd lied about. I know what you're going to say. Aiden's voice took on a defensive edge, as if the person on the other end of the call was objecting. Yes, I know she lied about the debt being settled. And yes, I know that technically makes it her problem, not mine. But she's my wife. When I married her, her problems became my problems. That's what marriage means. There was a long pause. No, I'm not going to confront her about the lie, Aiden said, his voice softening. Think about it from her perspective. Danielle was 23 years old when that accident happened, fresh out of nursing school, just starting her career, and suddenly she's facing medical bills that would take her a decade to pay off. She worked her way through the worst of it, got herself functional again, built a career despite everything, and when we met, she wanted to put that chapter behind her. Another pause. She told me it was settled because she was ashamed, Aiden continued, because she didn't want me to see her as damaged or financially broken. And I get that. My father used to say pride isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's what keeps people moving forward instead of drowning in their circumstances. Danielle's pride got her through recovery, through rebuilding her life. I'm not going to punish her for that. Danielle pressed her fist against her mouth, trying to muffle the sob that wanted to tear free. He understood. He's always understood. The late notices started showing up about 18 months ago, Aiden explained. I saw one in the mail before Danielle could intercept it. I recognized the street. Jude's letterhead from stories she'd told me about her recovery. I did some research, made some calls, and found out the truth. The debt was in aggressive collections, threatening her credit, potentially threatening her nursing license if it escalated. So I contacted the hospital system's billing department directly, he continued. Set up a payment plan under my own name, using my father's inheritance. $3,000 a month. No interest, no penalties, just steady payments to bring the balance down. I kept it completely separate from our joint finances, so Danielle would never see the transactions. Danielle's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold herself together. For 18 months, for $54,000 in payments already made, while she'd been suspecting him of hiding millions, while she'd been planning to divorce him, while she'd been calculating what she was owed from a marriage she'd already checked out of. He'd been sacrificing his inheritance to save her from her own lies. Today changes the timeline, Aiden said, his voice heavy with resignation. With Danielle losing her job, money is going to be tight. She's going to start looking more carefully at our finances, trying to figure out how we're going to manage on just my income from Vault Secure. If she digs too deep, she'll find the medical debt is still active. She'll realize, I knew she lied. And then she'll feel humiliated, indebted, ashamed of something that wasn't even her fault to begin with. I can't let that happen, Aiden said firmly. So we liquidate everything now. We close out that debt completely. And when Danielle eventually discovers that her medical debt mysteriously disappeared, I'll tell her the hospital system must have written it off, or there was some kind of insurance settlement she didn't know about. Whatever story lets her keep her dignity. There was another pause, longer this time. Yes, I know that's lying, Aiden admitted, but it's a lie that protects her. Unlike her lie, which protected her pride at my expense, my lie protects her future at my expense. And I'm okay with that trade. Danielle couldn't breathe. The contrast was too stark, too brutal. Her lie had been designed to expose him, to test him, to justify divorcing him and claiming whatever assets she could. His lie was designed to protect her, to preserve her dignity, to free her from a burden she'd been carrying for years. Just confirm the transfer for me by end of business tomorrow, Aiden said, his voice taking on that controlled, businesslike tone again. Send the confirmation to my personal email, not anything connected to Vault Secure or our joint accounts. And please, don't mention this to anyone. This stays between us. Another pause. Thank you. I mean that. My father would have approved of this. He always said the mark of a man isn't what he keeps for himself, but what he's willing to give up for the people he loves. Aiden's voice broke slightly on those last words. I love my wife, even when she doesn't trust me, even when she's hiding things from me, even when she's probably planning to leave me. Yes, I've noticed the distance, the coldness. I'm not blind. But love isn't conditional on being loved back the same way. My father taught me that too. So we do this. We liquidate the inheritance. We close the debt. We protect Danielle. And whatever happens with our marriage after that, at least I'll know I did right by her. The call ended. Danielle heard the soft click of Aiden's office phone being placed back in its cradle, then the creak of his desk chair as he stood. She had maybe 30 seconds before he emerged from his office. 30 seconds to process the fact that she'd just eavesdropped on the most profound act of love she'd ever witnessed. 30 seconds to process that her calculated test hadn't exposed his greed, it had triggered his sacrifice. 30 seconds to decide what kind of person she was going to be in the face of this devastating truth. Danielle looked down at her phone, at the email to Victoria Brennan that would initiate divorce proceedings against a man who was literally giving up his inheritance to protect her. Her finger moved across the screen. She deleted the email. Then she opened her text conversation with Rebecca and typed with shaking hands. I was wrong about everything. I need to tell you what I just heard. But first, I need to figure out how to stop the biggest mistake of my life. From down the hallway, she heard Aiden's office door open. And Danielle Foster, sitting on her bedroom floor in her blue nursing scrubs, realized she'd just destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to her. The only question now was whether she could find a way to save it. Danielle scrambled to her feet as she heard Aiden's footsteps in the hallway. Her legs felt unsteady, her whole body trembling with the weight of what she'd just overheard. She wiped frantically at her face, trying to erase the evidence of tears, but her eyes were swollen and her cheeks were still wet. She couldn't let him see her like this. Not yet. Not when she didn't have any explanation that wouldn't reveal she'd been eavesdropping. She heard him pause outside the bedroom door. Danielle? His voice was gentle, cautious. Are you okay in there? She forced herself to speak, though her voice came out rougher than she'd intended. Yeah, I'm just changing out of my scrubs. Give me a minute. There was a brief silence. Then, okay, I'll be downstairs. We can talk through the budget whenever you're ready. No rush. His footsteps retreated down the stairs, and Danielle sank back onto the bed, her mind reeling. We can talk through the budget. He was going to sit down with her and pretend to strategize about how they'd manage on his startup income alone. He was going to help her create a fictional plan for navigating fictional unemployment, all while having just liquidated $150,000 of his inheritance to pay off her very real, very hidden debt. The layers of deception, hers and his, though for completely opposite reasons, made Danielle's head spin. She looked down at her phone, at Rebecca's last text message that had come through while she'd been listening to Aiden's call. Girl, file tomorrow. Don't give him time to hide anything else. My divorce attorney is available for a consultation at 9 a.m. if you want me to set it up. Danielle's stomach churned with nausea. Just 30 minutes ago, she would have taken Rebecca up on that offer. She would have marched into that attorney's office with righteous fury, armed with her suspicions about Aiden's hidden millions and his calculated coldness. She would have been so utterly, devastatingly wrong. With shaking fingers, Danielle typed a response. I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to promise me something. Don't say anything to anyone about what I told you today. Not about the fake firing, not about the divorce plans, nothing. Please. I'll explain later, but right now, I just need you to trust me. The response came almost immediately. Okay. You're scaring me a little. Are you safe? Is Aiden threatening you or something? No. God, no. Nothing like that. I'm safe. I made a terrible mistake and I need time to fix it. Please just trust me. Okay, I trust you. Call me when you can talk. Danielle set her phone down and forced herself to really look at what she'd done. She'd tested her husband by lying about losing her job. A lie specifically designed to reveal whether he needed her income or whether he was secretly wealthy enough that $78,000 meant nothing to him. His calm reaction had confirmed her worst suspicions, or so she'd thought. But the truth was so much more complex, so much more devastating. Aiden had remained calm not because her income was insignificant to his hidden wealth, but because he'd already made the decision to sacrifice everything to protect her. Her fake firing had simply accelerated the timeline of a sacrifice he'd been planning all along. And what had she been planning? Danielle walked to her closet and reached up to the top shelf, pulling down a folder she'd hidden behind her winter sweaters. Inside were documents she'd been collecting for the past 3 weeks, ever since she'd overheard that phone call about protecting assets and postnups. Printouts of North Carolina divorce law regarding asset division, a list of Aiden's known accounts and investments, notes about Vault Secure's potential valuation, a draft timeline for when to file, calculated to maximize her settlement. And at the bottom of the folder, a partially completed divorce petition that she downloaded from the state court website. Danielle looked at these documents now and felt a wave of self-loathing so intense it made her physically ill. While Aidan had been quietly liquidating his father's inheritance to pay off her debt, she'd been calculating how to extract maximum value from their marriage before abandoning it. The math was brutal in its clarity. Aidan had already paid $54,000 over 18 months. He was now liquidating another $150,000 to finish the job, $204,000 total. And what had she been planning to claim in the divorce? She'd calculated it down to the dollar during one of her late-night research sessions. Approximately half of their home equity, about $17,000. Half of Aidan's $401k, which Victoria Brennan had told her might amount to $40,000. And if she could prove Vault Secure was worth what she suspected, potentially another $100,000 or more in business assets, she'd been planning to walk away with somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000. Almost exactly the amount Aidan was spending to protect her from her own lies. The symmetry was horrifying. Danielle ripped the divorce petition in half, then in half again, and again, until it was nothing but confetti in her trembling hands. She shoved the pieces back into the folder along with all the other documents, then buried the folder at the bottom of her closet beneath a pile of shoes. Evidence of her greed, evidence of her betrayal, evidence of how close she'd come to destroying the one person who'd been willing to sacrifice everything for her. She needed to fix this. Somehow, she needed to make this right. But how? She couldn't tell Aidan she'd overheard his phone call that would expose her eavesdropping and violate the privacy of the gift he was trying to give her. He specifically wanted her to never know about his sacrifice. She couldn't suddenly find the money to pay off the medical debt herself. She didn't have $150,000, and any attempt to suddenly acquire it would raise questions she couldn't answer. She couldn't confess to lying about being fired without explaining why she'd tested him in the first place, which would expose her suspicions, her divorce research, her calculated betrayal. Every option felt like it would hurt him more. Danielle changed out of her scrubs mechanically, pulling on sweatpants and a t-shirt. She washed her face, trying to reduce the swelling around her eyes, but there was only so much cold water could do. When she finally forced herself to go downstairs, she found Aidan sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a legal pad covered in notes beside him. He looked up when she entered, and his expression was so gentle, so genuinely concerned, that Danielle felt tears threaten again. "Hey," he said softly, "come sit down. I've been running some preliminary numbers." Danielle sat across from him, not trusting herself to sit beside him. If he touched her right now, if he offered comfort, she would completely fall apart. Aidan turned the legal pad so she could see his neat handwriting. "Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. My salary from Vault Secure is about $92,000 base, but with the performance bonuses I've been getting, it's been closer to $110,000. If we're careful, we can absolutely manage on that." He was lying. She could see it in the slight tension around his eyes, the way his fingers tapped against the table. Vault Secure was still burning through cash, still in that precarious startup phase where Aidan's salary was far from guaranteed. He'd told her that much months ago, before she'd started suspecting him of hiding wealth. But he was lying to comfort her, to make her feel secure despite her fictional job loss. Just like he was lying about not knowing about her medical debt, just like she was lying about being fired. They were both sitting at this table, weaving elaborate deceptions, but only one of them was doing it out of love. "We'll need to cut back on some things," Aidan continued, pointing to different line items on his list. "Maybe cancel the premium streaming services. Reduce how often we eat out. I can start packing lunch instead of buying it. And we should probably hold off on any major purchases for a while." Major purchases like liquidating your inheritance, Danielle thought, the irony like acid in her throat. The mortgage is our biggest expense, Aiden said, his voice steady and analytical. But I really don't think we need to sell the house. Not yet. Let's see how your job search goes first. You're a skilled nurse, Danielle. Hospitals are always hiring. You might find something new within a month or two. He was so convincing, so earnest, planning out a budget for a crisis that didn't exist, while secretly orchestrating a financial sacrifice that absolutely did. What about health insurance? Danielle heard herself ask, her voice hollow. Aiden nodded. That's going to be our biggest immediate challenge. Cobra through your hospital would be expensive, probably around $1,200 a month for both of us. But Vault Secure offers a basic plan. The coverage isn't as good as what you had, and the deductible is higher, but it would work as a temporary solution. I can add you to my plan as soon as your hospital coverage ends. Every word was careful, practical, loving. Every word made Danielle feel more like a monster. Aiden, she started, then stopped, not knowing how to continue. He looked up at her, waiting. I'm sorry, she whispered. His expression softened even further. Hey, this isn't your fault. Budget cuts happen. The hospital is making a business decision. You didn't do anything wrong. But I did, Danielle wanted to scream. I lied to you. I tested you. I was planning to divorce you. And you're sitting here planning a budget to protect me while you sacrifice your father's legacy. Instead, she just nodded, not trusting her voice. Aiden reached across the table and squeezed her hand. His touch was warm, solid, real. We're going to be okay, he said with quiet confidence. We're a team, Danielle. We'll figure this out together. We're a team. The same words she'd been planning to use in her divorce filing as evidence of his manipulation. He constantly emphasized we were a team while hiding his true assets. But he'd meant it. He'd always meant it. Danielle pulled her hand back, standing abruptly. I need to make a phone call to my supervisor at the hospital about the severance paperwork and things. Aiden nodded understandingly. Of course. Take your time. Danielle fled back upstairs to the bedroom, closing the door and leaning against it. She pulled out her phone and called Rebecca. Danielle? What's going on? I need you to listen to me, Danielle said, her voice shaking. And I need you to help me figure out how to fix the worst thing I've ever done. And then, for the next 30 minutes, she told Rebecca everything. The overheard phone call, the test, the eavesdropping, the truth about the medical debt, Aiden's sacrifice. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Oh, Danielle, Rebecca finally said, her voice thick with shock. Oh my God! I know, Danielle whispered. I know. What do I do? How do I fix this? I don't know, Rebecca admitted, but you can't let him liquidate that inheritance. That was his father's legacy. That's everything he has as a safety net. I know, Danielle repeated helplessly. But how do I stop it without admitting I was eavesdropping? Without explaining that I lied about being fired? Without revealing that I was planning to divorce him? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I think, she finally said, you're going to have to be honest about all of it. It's going to hurt, and it's going to be humiliating. But Danielle, you can't build a real marriage on this many lies. Not anymore. Danielle knew Rebecca was right, but she also knew that the truth might destroy everything. And she wasn't sure Aiden's love was strong enough to survive the revelation of just how close she'd come to betraying it. Danielle didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed beside Aiden, listening to his steady breathing, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on her chest like a physical force. Around 2 a.m, she'd made a decision. She would tell him the truth, all of it. Tomorrow morning, she would confess to lying about being fired, explain her suspicions and her fears, and beg for his forgiveness. It would be humiliating. It would probably end their marriage. But it would be honest. And maybe, just maybe, honesty could salvage something from the wreckage of her betrayal. But when morning came, when she found Aidan already awake and dressed in the kitchen, making coffee with that gentle smile he always wore in the early hours, her courage failed. "Morning," he said, pouring her a cup without being asked, adding the exact amount of cream she liked. "I was thinking today I could start reaching out to my network, see if anyone knows of nursing positions opening up. My friend Terrence's wife works in hospital administration. She might have leads." Terrence, the person he'd been talking to on the phone yesterday, the person helping him liquidate his inheritance. Danielle took the coffee with trembling hands. "Aidan, I need to tell you something." He looked at her with such open, trusting concern that the words died in her throat. "What is it?" She couldn't do it. She couldn't sit here in their kitchen, with him looking at her like she was something precious, and tell him she'd been planning to divorce him. Not yet. Not until she'd figured out how to at least stop him from destroying his financial future for her. I'm sorry about the medical debt," she said instead, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Aidan's expression flickered surprise, then something more guarded. "Medical debt?" "From my accident," Danielle continued, her heart hammering. "6 years ago, I told you it was all settled, but there's still a balance, a significant balance. I've been trying to handle it on my own, but with the late notices, and now losing my job," she let her voice trail off, watching his face. She was testing him again, she realized with a sick feeling. Even now, even after everything she'd learned, part of her needed to see how he'd react. Aidan set down his coffee cup carefully. "How much?" he asked quietly. "Around $150,000, Danielle whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you before. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me as damaged or financially broken. I thought I could handle it myself." But Aidan moved around the kitchen island and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was firm, warm, and completely unexpected. Danielle felt herself start to cry against his chest, overwhelmed by the gap between what she deserved and what he was giving her. "Hey," he murmured into her hair. "It's okay. We'll figure it out." "You're not angry?" Danielle managed to ask through her tears. She felt him take a deep breath. "Angry that you've been carrying this burden alone for years? Angry that you felt like you couldn't trust me with the truth?" "No, Danielle, I'm not angry. I'm just sad that you've been dealing with this stress by yourself." He was so good at this, Danielle realized. So good at the careful lie, the protective deception. He was letting her confess just enough to ease her conscience, without revealing that he'd known all along. "But Aidan, $150,000, she said, pulling back to look at his face. "On top of me losing my job, we can't possibly, we'll figure it out," he repeated firmly. "Maybe we can negotiate with the hospital, set up a payment plan. With your new job, once you find it, we'll dedicate a portion of your income to paying it down. It'll take time, but we'll handle it together." He had no intention of letting her pay a single dollar, Danielle knew. He'd already liquidated everything. The debt would mysteriously disappear within days, and he'd give her some plausible explanation about insurance settlements or hospital write-offs. "I don't deserve you," Danielle whispered. Aidan smiled, that gentle, heartbreaking smile. "That's not how marriage works. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing each other, even when things get hard." Especially when things get hard, Danielle thought, remembering his words from the phone call. "Even when she's hiding things from me, even when she's probably planning to leave me." He knew. On some level, Aidan knew she'd been pulling away, growing cold, planning an exit, and he was choosing to sacrifice everything anyway. "I need to go into the office for a few hours," Aidan said, glancing at his watch. "Board meeting I can't miss. But I'll be home by 3, and we can continue working on the budget. Sound good?" Danielle nodded, not trusting her voice. After Aidan left, she sat alone in the kitchen, staring at her coffee cup. He was going to finish liquidating the inheritance today. She was certain of it. That board meeting was probably another call with Terrence, finalizing the transfer to Street Jude's. And she was going to let the man she'd been planning to divorce sacrifice his father's legacy while continuing to lie to his face about being fired. The realization of her own cowardice hit her like a slap. She pulled out her phone and called Rebecca. "I tried to confess," Danielle said when Rebecca answered. "I told him about the medical debt, but I couldn't tell him about the firing or the divorce plans. Rebecca, I'm such a coward." "What did he say? About the debt?" "He said we'd figure it out together. He's going to let me believe we'll set up a payment plan, while he's secretly already paid it off." Danielle's voice broke. "He's protecting my lie while I'm lying about everything else." "Then you need to stop him," Rebecca said firmly. "Stop him from liquidating that money, whatever it takes." "How?" "I can't tell him the truth without admitting I eavesdropped. And if I admit that, I have to admit why I was suspicious in the first place, which means admitting I was planning to divorce him." "So admit it," Rebecca said. "Danielle, at this point, full honesty is the only thing that might save your marriage. Yes, it's going to hurt him. Yes, it's going to be awful. But letting him destroy his financial security to pay for debt you lied about while you continue lying to him, that's worse. That's so much worse." Danielle knew Rebecca was right. But she also knew that confessing everything meant potentially losing Aiden forever. And despite everything she'd done, despite how close she'd come to destroying their marriage herself, the thought of losing him was unbearable. She'd been willing to divorce him when she thought he was a calculating monster hiding millions. But now that she knew he was a loving husband sacrificing everything, now she wanted desperately to keep him. The hypocrisy of it made her hate herself. "I have an idea," Danielle said slowly. "It's not perfect, but it might buy me time to figure out how to tell him the truth." "What is it?" "I'm going to stop the transfer, without him knowing." Danielle spent the next 2 hours in a state of frantic, calculated desperation that reminded her uncomfortably of the cold planning she'd done while researching divorce strategies. The difference, she told herself, was that this time she was trying to protect Aiden, not rob him. It was a thin moral distinction, but it was all she had. She started by calling Street Jude's Specialty Care Trust directly. The automated system gave her options for billing inquiries, and she navigated through the menus until she reached a human being. "Street Jude's Billing Services. This is Patricia speaking. How can I help you?" Danielle took a breath. "Hi, yes. I'm calling about account number ending in 7743. I believe there's a large payment being processed, and I need to inquire about the status." "One moment, please." There was typing. "Yes, I see the account. Are you the account holder?" "I'm Danielle Foster. The debt is under my name." "I see. Yes, Miss Foster. We have a payment of $150,000 scheduled to process tomorrow morning. This will close out your account completely. Is there a problem?" "Tomorrow morning." Danielle's heart sank. She was almost too late. "Actually, yes," Danielle said, thinking quickly. "I need to request a hold on that payment. There may be insurance complications that need to be resolved first." "I'm sorry, Miss Foster, but this payment is being made by a third party." Patricia paused, clearly checking her notes. "And Aiden Foster? I would need his authorization to place a hold." "He's my husband," Danielle said, "and he's actually out of the country right now on business. Terrible cell reception. He asked me to call and request the hold on his behalf." It was a clumsy lie, but it was all she could think of. "I understand, but our policy requires authorization from the paying party for any changes to scheduled payments. If Mr. Foster could call us directly or send an email from the address we have on file." "Of course," Danielle interrupted. "I'll have him call as soon as he can get to a landline. Thank you." She hung up, her hands shaking. That hadn't worked. She needed a different approach. Danielle opened her laptop and pulled up Aiden's email. She knew his password. They'd shared it years ago when setting up their home network, and he'd never changed it. Another sign of his trust that now felt like an accusation. She typed Terrence into the search bar and found the email thread from yesterday. Aiden's financial advisor's full name was Terrence Walsh, and his email signature included his office phone number. Danielle dialed before she could lose her nerve. Walsh Financial Management, this is Terrence. Mr. Walsh, this is Danielle Foster, Aiden Foster's wife. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Foster, what can I do for you? He sounded surprised and uncomfortable, probably wondering how she'd gotten his number, why she was calling. I know about the inheritance liquidation, Danielle said bluntly. I know Aiden is transferring $150,000 to pay off my medical debt. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mrs. Foster, I'm not sure what. Please don't insult my intelligence, Danielle interrupted. I need you to stop the transfer. I can't do that without your husband's authorization. And frankly, Mrs. Foster, this is between you and your husband. I'm just facilitating. Mr. Walsh, I'm asking you, as someone who clearly cares about Aiden's well-being, to please delay this transfer, just for a few days. I need time to handle this situation differently. Handle it how? Danielle hadn't thought that far ahead. I'm going to pay the debt myself, she said, the lie forming even as she spoke it. I have access to funds that Aiden doesn't know about. An inheritance from my grandmother that I've kept separate. I can close out the medical debt without him sacrificing his father's legacy. Another long silence. Mrs. Foster, with all due respect, if you had access to that kind of money, why wouldn't you have used it to pay off the debt years ago? Because it doesn't exist, Danielle wanted to say. Because I'm making this up as I go, trying to save my husband from the consequences of my own lies. It's complicated, she said instead. Family trust issues, restricted access, legal paperwork. But I can have the funds available within a week. I just need you to delay Aiden's transfer so I can beat him to it. This is highly irregular, Terrence said. I know, but please. Aiden's father worked 2 jobs to maintain that life insurance policy. It was meant to be Aiden's security, his foundation. I can't let him give it all away for my mistakes. She heard Terrence sigh deeply. Your husband specifically instructed me to process this transfer tomorrow morning. Please, Danielle whispered. Just a few days. Tell him there's a processing delay, or paperwork issues, or anything. Just give me time to fix this. The silence stretched out so long that Danielle thought he might have hung up. I'll tell him there's a verification hold on liquidating this amount, Terrence finally said. The compliance department needs additional documentation. That'll buy you maybe 3 or 4 days. But Mrs. Foster, if you don't follow through, if Aiden finds out I delayed this at your request, I'll follow through, Danielle promised, having no idea how she'd possibly keep that promise. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hung up and immediately opened her banking app. Checking account, $3,247. Savings account, $12,883. Her 401k from the hospital had maybe $35,000 in it, but withdrawing early would incur massive penalties and taxes. Even if she liquidated everything she had, she wouldn't come close to $150,000. Danielle stared at the numbers on her screen, feeling the weight of her impossible situation crushing down on her. She'd bought herself a few days by lying to Terrence, but unless she could somehow produce $150,000 or tell Aiden the truth about everything, she just delayed the inevitable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. Aiden, board meeting went well. Heading home now. Want me to pick up lunch? Danielle typed back with shaking hands. Sure, whatever you want is fine. She set her phone down and stared at her laptop screen, at the pathetic balance in her accounts. There had to be a solution. Some way to stop Aiden's sacrifice without destroying what little trust remained between them. And then, with a sick feeling in her stomach, Danielle realized what she had to do. She had to take out loans, massive loans, against her retirement accounts, against anything she could leverage, and she had to do it fast, before Terrence's fabricated delay ran out. It would financially cripple her. The interest rates would be brutal, the repayment timeline years, but it was the only way to pay off the medical debt herself before Aiden could. And maybe, if she could accomplish that, she could find the courage to tell him the truth about everything else. One betrayal at a time, Danielle spent the rest of the afternoon researching personal loan options, retirement account loans, anything that could generate the cash she needed. The numbers were grim, but possible. If she maxed out multiple sources, she could maybe cobble together $130,000. For the remaining $20,000, she'd have to negotiate with Street Jude's billing department, beg them to accept a reduced settlement to close the account. It wasn't a perfect plan. It probably wouldn't even work. But it was better than letting Aiden sacrifice everything while she continued lying to his face. When Aiden came home with sandwiches from their favorite deli, Danielle forced herself to eat and smile and pretend everything was normal. And that night, lying in bed beside her husband, Danielle made herself a promise. She had 4 days to fix this, 4 days to stop the transfer, pay the debt herself, and find the courage to confess everything. 4 days to prove that she could be even a fraction of the person Aiden had always believed she was. The question was whether 4 days would be enough. 3 days later, Danielle was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by loan applications and financial statements, when her phone rang. Terrence Walsh's name appeared on the screen. Her stomach dropped. "Hello? Mrs. Foster, we have a problem." Terrence's voice was tight with stress. "Aiden just called me, furious about the delay. He's demanding to know why the transfer hasn't processed. I told him about the compliance hold, but he's insisting on speaking directly to the verification department. I can't keep stalling him." Danielle closed her eyes. "How long do I have?" "Hours, maybe. He's already called the bank twice. Once he gets through to someone who tells him there's no actual hold, he's going to know I lied to him. And Mrs. Foster, he's going to want to know why." "I understand," Danielle said quietly. "Thank you for trying." She hung up and looked down at the paperwork in front of her. She'd managed to secure loans totaling $105,000, still $45,000 short of what she needed, and Street Jude's billing department had refused to negotiate a settlement. They wanted the full balance. She'd failed. In trying to save Aiden from his sacrifice, she'd just created more lies, more deception, more broken trust. Danielle heard the front door open. Aiden was home from Vault Secure early, and from the heavy sound of his footsteps, something was wrong. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face tight with confusion and anger. "I just got off the phone with Terrence. He's been lying to me about a processing delay. There is no compliance hold. There never was." Danielle stood up slowly, her heart hammering. "And then," Aiden continued, his voice rising, "I called the bank directly to demand answers. They told me someone claiming to be my assistant called last week trying to halt the transfer." "Danielle, I don't have an assistant. So who the hell called my bank?" There it was, the moment of truth she'd been dreading. "I did," Danielle whispered. Aiden stared at her. "You did what?" "I called them. I tried to stop the transfer." "How did you even know about the transfer?" His voice was sharp now, demanding. "How did you know about any of this?" Danielle felt tears streaming down her face. "I overheard you 3 days ago. When I told you I got fired, you went to your office to make a call, and I listened. I heard everything you said to Terrence." Aiden's expression shifted from anger to something closer to betrayal. "You were eavesdropping on my private conversation?" "Yes." "For how long?" "The whole call. I heard you liquidating your inheritance. I heard you talk about paying off my medical debt. I heard you say it was a gift, that you didn't want me to know." The words came out in a rush now, desperate and broken. And I couldn't let you do it, Aiden. I couldn't let you give up your father's legacy for me. Aiden sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. When he spoke, his voice was muffled. So you called Terrence and lied to him. You manipulated my financial advisor into delaying a transfer. I specifically instructed him to process. I'm sorry. Why? Aiden looked up at her, and his eyes were red. Why did you care so much about stopping me? You're the one who's been pulling away from me for weeks. You're the one who's been cold and distant. I thought. He stopped, taking a shaky breath. I thought maybe if I could just fix this one thing for you, fix the debt that's been weighing on you for years, maybe you'd remember why you married me in the first place. Danielle felt something break inside her chest. Aiden, I need to tell you something else, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I lied to you. I didn't get fired. He stared at her blankly. What? I didn't lose my job. I made it up. It was a test. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. A test, Aiden repeated slowly, as if the words didn't make sense. You lied about losing your job as a test? Danielle nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I overheard you on the phone 3 weeks ago. You were talking to Terrence about protecting assets, about keeping things from me until after a postnup was drafted. I thought you were hiding millions from Vault Secure. I thought you were planning to divorce me and keep all the money for yourself. So you lied about being fired to see how I'd react, Aiden finished, his voice flat. Yes, I thought if you stayed calm, if you didn't panic about losing my income, it would prove you were secretly wealthy and didn't need me. And when I did stay calm, Danielle forced herself to look at him. I thought it confirmed everything. I thought you were a calculating monster. I was planning to file for divorce. I had documents ready, an attorney lined up. I was going to file before you could hide more assets. Aiden's face had gone completely pale. You were planning to divorce me? Yes, Danielle whispered, until I heard that phone call, until I realized the truth about what you were really doing. Aiden stood abruptly, walking to the window, his back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I knew you were pulling away. I knew something was wrong between us. But I hoped that if I could just show you how much I loved you, how committed I was to our partnership, you'd come back to me. So I decided to pay off your debt. Not because I thought it would buy your love, but because I couldn't stand watching you carry that burden alone. Aiden, I was going to sacrifice my inheritance, he continued, still not looking at her, for a woman who was planning to divorce me, who tested me with lies, who was calculating how much money she could extract from our marriage. I'm so sorry. Are you? Aiden turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. Are you sorry you planned to leave me? Or are you just sorry you got caught? The question hung in the air between them. I'm sorry for all of it, Danielle said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry I let fear and greed turn me into someone I don't recognize. I'm sorry I tested you instead of trusting you. I'm sorry I was planning to throw away the best thing that's ever happened to me because I was too insecure to believe someone could actually love me without conditions. She pulled the crumpled divorce documents from her pocket, the ones she'd torn up days ago. She'd kept the pieces, unable to throw them away entirely. This is what I was planning, she said, spreading the torn papers on the table. This is how close I came to destroying us. And then I heard you on that phone call, heard you talking about protecting me, sacrificing for me, loving me, even when I didn't deserve it, and I realized what I'd become. Aiden looked at the torn papers, then back at her. I spent the last 3 days trying to fix it, Danielle continued. I took out loans, I maxed out my credit, I did everything I could to come up with the money to pay off the debt myself before you could. I have $105,000. It's not enough, but I thought if I could at least show you I was trying to protect your inheritance. $105,000? Aiden's voice was sharp. Danielle, where did you get that kind of money? Loans against my retirement accounts. Personal loans at terrible interest rates. I'll be paying them off for years. But I thought, you destroyed your financial security to stop me from helping you? Aiden looked stunned. Danielle, those loans will cost you more in interest than the medical debt would have. I know, but it wasn't your debt to pay. And I couldn't let you give up everything your father left you for my mistakes. Aiden sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. I know. They sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Aiden spoke. The medical debt is already paid. Danielle's head snapped up. What? I processed the transfer yesterday, called the bank directly, and pushed it through manually. The debt is closed. You're free of it. But Terrence said, Terrence was trying to protect you because you asked him to. But I'm not an idiot, Danielle. When my financial advisor suddenly starts acting suspicious, I go around him. Aiden's voice was tired. The money is gone. My inheritance is liquidated. It's done. Danielle felt her world collapse. Aiden, no. It's done, he repeated firmly. And honestly, I'm glad it is, because at least one good thing came out of this nightmare. You're free of that debt. Whatever happens between us, at least you won't be carrying that burden anymore. Whatever happens between us, Danielle echoed softly. Are you going to leave me? Aiden looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, he said honestly. I need time to process all of this. The lies, the test, the divorce plans. The fact that you thought so little of me, that you believed I was capable of hiding millions while planning to cut you out. I was wrong about everything, Danielle said desperately. I know that now. You're the most generous, loving, selfless person I've ever met. And I almost destroyed us, because I couldn't believe someone like you could actually exist. That's not good enough, Aiden said quietly. Realization isn't the same as change. You've shown me who you become when you're scared and insecure. And Danielle, I can't live with someone who responds to fear by calculating how to extract maximum value from our marriage. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. I want to change, she whispered. I want to be better. I want to be worthy of the love you've been giving me. Then prove it, Aiden said. Not with grand gestures or financial sacrifices. Prove it by being honest, by trusting me, by building a marriage based on truth instead of tests and suspicions. How? How do I prove that? Aiden stood up. I think we need help. Professional help. Marriage counseling. Individual therapy. Whatever it takes. Because Danielle, I still love you. Even after everything, I still love you. But love isn't enough if we can't trust each other. I'll do anything, Danielle promised. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be the partner you deserve. Don't promise the rest of your life, Aiden said softly. Just promise me tomorrow, and then the day after that. One day at a time, one honest conversation at a time. That's all I'm asking for. Danielle nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise. Aiden walked over to her and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. The gesture was so tender, so familiar, that it made Danielle's heart ache. I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight, he said. I need space to think. But tomorrow, we'll start figuring this out. We'll find a counselor. We'll start being honest. We'll see if we can build something real out of all these broken pieces. Okay, Danielle whispered. As Aiden packed an overnight bag, Danielle sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by her loan documents and his torn divorce papers. She'd tested her husband to expose his greed and discovered his sacrifice. She'd planned to divorce him for hiding millions and learned he was giving away everything to protect her. She destroyed her own financial security trying to save his inheritance, and found out she was too late. Every calculation had been wrong. Every suspicion had been false. Every plan had backfired spectacularly. But in the wreckage of all her betrayals, one truth remained. Aidan loved her. Despite everything, he loved her. And for the first time in their marriage, Danielle was going to have to learn to love him back, without conditions, without tests, without exit strategies. It would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. But as she watched Aidan walk out the door with his overnight bag, promising to call her tomorrow, Danielle knew it was the only thing worth doing. Because some sacrifices aren't about money, or inheritances, or grand gestures. Sometimes the greatest sacrifice is simply choosing to be honest, to be vulnerable, to trust that love is worth more than security. And Danielle Foster, sitting alone in her kitchen, with $105,000 in loans she didn't need, and a marriage hanging by a thread, was finally ready to make that sacrifice, one honest day at a time. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. Would you have forgiven Danielle? Could Aidan trust her again? Let me know below. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.